Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great. Good. You've undoubtedly seen them at estate sales, gun shows, and stores. Decades old cans of gunpowder with ridiculously low original price tags from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s that are for sale today. And with so many powders essentially being unobtainium or rising rapidly in price in recent years, you might have been tempted by those old cans that someone might have only used some of before you that are now selling for a lot less than the brand new ones. But you didn't, because you've heard that old gunpowder can bring a lot of issues along with it. Was that a mistake? Well, I'm going to hopefully answer that question for you today. Reloading components shortages aren't as bad as they used to be, but there are still some powders that are really hard to find or have just jumped in price. And if you come across an old can of a preferred powder, you might want to reconsider that reticence. Let's get into it. Now, I'm going to say at the outset, there's nothing inherently wrong with buying and using old powder, provided that it's been stored properly, and I'm going to get into that later in the video, and there are no signs that it's deteriorated or contaminated, you're good to go. So how does one tell if a powder is still good despite being in a package that's older than you are? Well, there are actually some obvious tells. Now first, take a look at the container itself. If it's one of the old school metal containers, check to see if there's any rust or corrosion visible on it. A container that's been compromised on the outside, particularly the lid and the area around it, could very well have issues on the inside as well. Now, if it looks to be largely intact, that's a good sign. The same goes for the cardboard containers. Obviously, you won't see rust on the sides, but take a look at the metal top and bottom. Now, if you're able to open the container of powder, do so. And if you see clumping, that's a sign to take a pass. It likely had some sort of contamination, most likely moisture, introduced at some point. Now, if that container has never been opened and is undamaged, it's probably good to go. Now, if you're familiar with the powder and you see that it's a markedly different color than what you would normally expect, it should be some sort of shade of gray, that could be a sign that it was exposed to heat, and heat does deteriorate smokeless powder. Now, one good way of determining whether smokeless powder has deteriorated is by smelling it. If it has no smell, or it resembles something like acetone or alcohol, it's more than likely good. Powders that are deteriorating will often smell like cat urine or have an acidic odor that's similar to vinegar. It may also give off a reddish brown fume when you open the container. Take a pass. Now, if you're still tempted to use powder with signs of contamination or deterioration by, carefully sifting out what you think is the bad stuff or blending that clean, sifted remainder with known good smokeless powder, that's a bad idea. All you're doing is using contaminated powder or contaminating good powder by blending it with bad. Now, one recommendation I would make is to avoid old gunpowders that haven't been manufactured in years. The powder itself might not be compromised, but you may face the issue of not being able to find load data for it. Keep that in mind when looking at old powders. However, that said, powders often also change manufacturers as well, so do some research to find out if the powder that you're looking at is now being made by a company with a different name. Now, you won't see this until you actually shoot the loaded ammunition and, of course, use a chronograph, but wild swings in velocity are also a sign of deterioration, and you should get rid of that powder. Now, I mentioned earlier that I discuss proper storage of gunpowder, so I'll briefly run over this for the new kids in the audience. Gunpowder should always be stored in a cool and dry place. It should be kept away from direct sunlight. That's why you should keep it in the original container that it came in. Have you ever seen a clear container of gunpowder? There's a reason for that. Now, wherever you keep that gunpowder, it shouldn't be near generators of heat, flames, machinery, light bulbs, electrical circuits, that sort of thing. Don't laugh, I have seen things. Now this goes without saying, but for the love of all that's holy, don't smoke in the same area where you keep your gunpowder or even where you reload. A while ago, I did some videos about an incident in Florida where the ATF noted that the reloader may have smoked near a few pounds of gunpowder. Now, if that was the cause of the explosion, the homeowner got a chance to remodel a large part of his home. And clean your reloading area regularly, both the surface your press is attached to and the floor around it. You'll be surprised to how much gunpowder just disappears around you into the carpet or onto the desk. Now, if you want to go all out and construct a storage enclosure designed to insulate your powder from heat and also vent gases in case of a fire, so half your house doesn't find itself in your neighbor's lawns, you can find plans online to do so. It's not a bad idea, but it's your house and family. You do you. So, does the Redneck Preppy wade into the deep end of old powders? Yes. Here's an 8-pound jug of BLC2 that I bought last year that was part of an estate sale. You can see by the label, it is clearly old. You can compare it to the new label. I've had no issues using this powder. The previous owner had used some of it himself, as there were 7 pounds in the jug, but he stored it properly. Now, there are people who will tell you to avoid old gunpowder because the impression is, amongst many, that it has an expiry date, and if you use it, you'll only experience partial or failed ignitions, leading to bullets jammed in the barrel, or you'll recreate scenes out of Oppenheimer. And I'm not talking about the nude ones. The reality is that if you're careful and check the powder for signs of contamination or deterioration, and there's none, you probably have powder that only differs in its packaging. Smokeless powder has a near indefinite shelf life if the container has never been opened. But even if it has, as long as it's been properly stored, it can last for decades. This is a fact. There are people today in 2024 who still have some surplus gunpowder that Hodgson, this company right here, bought from the United States military just after World War II and then subsequently resold to the public. It still goes bang, just like the new stuff does. At any rate, I hope you found today's video to at least be vaguely entertaining and mildly informative. As always, I hope your adventures in reloading are productive and safe. Take care, and bye-bye.